The Arabian Gulf is on edge. Over the last 24 hours, the fragile quiet that followed weeks of tit-for-tat strikes has shattered. Air defenses flared, fires broke out at oil infrastructure, and capitals from Abu Dhabi to Washington moved into emergency mode. Commercial shipping, the lifeblood of global energy markets, is once again under threat, and the calculations that kept restraint intact are unraveling. A pattern has emerged that must be understood on three levels: what happened in the skies and at sea, what it means for the region's military balance and political decision-making, what that says about the internal state of power inside Tehran. At the most immediate level, the United Arab Emirates reported an unprecedented salvo: missiles and drones approaching its territory, air defenses engaging multiple targets, and damage and casualties at an oil facility in the eastern emirate of Fujairah. US Central Command has confirmed repeated Iranian attacks on ships and has described. By sustained Iranian activity in the Strait of Hormuz, American warships have been escort commercial vessels through the waterway. Iran, in turn, has kept pressure on the maritime route it long views as strategic leverage. On the military front, the United States has positioned its forces to protect shipping and to respond rapidly. Admiral Brad Cooper now leads USS. Central Command and CENTCOM officers have said publicly that Iranian missiles, drones, and swarming small boats have been used repeatedly against US assets and merchant shipping. The picture is not of a single isolated strike, but of a year-long campaign that has evolved into a fast-moving multi-domain confrontation, sea lanes, airspaces, and logistics nodes, and the ever-present risk of escalation into broader regional conflict. Israel, too, has moved to a higher state of readiness. Air defenses across the region have been active. Reports from Gulf capitals indicate cooperation behind the scenes in countering missile and drone threats. Militaries are preparing for rapid response in case the limited exchanges tip into open combat. Fueling and refueling aircraft patterns have changed. There is more loiter time for fighters, more capacity to surge into contested airspace. That logistical detail. Gas in the sky is a visible signal that commanders expect the need for endurance, projection, and the ability to strike deeper if ordered. But there is another layer to this story that reaches inside Iran itself. Over recent days, we have seen a rare, publicly audible crack between Tehran's civilian leadership and its Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian occupies the official seat of government. The Revolutionary Guards are the country's most powerful military instrument and a parallel power center. Those two poles are in open friction. Masoud Pezeshkian said Pezeshkian called the attack on the United Arab Emirates madness and complete irresponsibility. That is how Key rivalry is being described in multiple reports. The president furious that the Guards' missile and drone strikes were planned and executed without, he says, full government coordination. Whether every element of that account is independently verifiable, the consequence is clear. Decisions that affect the region are no longer being made inside a single coherent chain of command. That raises the risk of miscalculation. At the same time, a hardline military voice from inside Iran issued a stark warning to the Emirates that was broadcast and widely amplified by regional media. A Revolutionary Guards military source said, "If the Emiratis make mistakes, it will learn a lesson that it will never forget. If it takes an unwise action, all of its interests will become a target of Iran." Threatening language like that is designed to deter response, but it also signals the Guards' willingness to use tools that reach beyond their borders. The diplomatic consequence of these internal instance is complicated. Washington has been explicit. It prefers a negotiated outcome, but has kept military options on the table. President Donald J. Trump and his national security team say they want to end the confrontation through a deal that addresses the nuclear question and the security of shipping But they have also calibrated a campaign that aims to coerce Tehran into concessions by choking off revenue and challenging Iran's ability to project power in the Gulf. On the nuclear file, American intelligence has been blunt in recent public and off-the-record assessments. The threat that drew so much of this conflict remains both tangible and time-sensitive. US intelligence said as without removing the enriched uranium from Iran, the Shia regime will be able to develop nuclear weapons in less than a year. That is the alarm that underpins much of the pressure coming from Washington and from Israel. Whatever else happens in the Gulf, the stakes for the nuclear timeline are doctored downline. Giving policymakers to weigh the cost of strikes against the cost of inaction, to understand why, consider the elements of Iran's capacity that have survived previous strikes. Buildings can be destroyed, centrifuge cascades can be damaged or dispersed, supply chains can be disrupted, but material already enriched, the uranium itself, is the hardest thing to erase from the ledger. If significant stocks remain within Iran, the physical path to a weapon shortens dramatically. That reality helps explain the urgency in the US strategy and the alarm in allied capitals. If a strike option is chosen, how would it look? Flipped. US planners have developed options that run from targeted strikes on Revolutionary Guard facilities, missile production and storage sites, and critical infrastructure to broader, limited duration air campaigns designed to degrade Tehran's military-industrial base. Israel's calculations would be similar. Precision strikes against military nodes and infrastructure combine with defensive measures at home. But military planners on both sides acknowledge a sobering limitation. This is an asymmetrical contest. Iran's distributed capabilities, small boats, drones, proxy networks, and hidden facilities make it difficult to eliminate the threat entirely with a single campaign. That is why even decisive kinetic operations carry the risk of an extended, costly stalemate. On the diplomatic front, American officials have been pushing allies to take clearer positions and contributions in protecting shipping lanes. There is friction with European partners who are wary of direct military entanglement. There is bipartisan political pressure in Washington to show results quickly. President Trump has used the diplomatic carrot and the military stick in public and private, warning that negotiations cannot succeed unless Tehran accepts intrusive verification, removes enriched material from its territory, and clamps down on proxy violence. Inside Iran, the economic picture has deteriorated sharply. Inflation and currency collapse have produced social strain, and the government is scrambling with subsidy measures, including targeted electronic vouchers and emergency aid. When a society reels under economic shock while being led by competing power centers, decisions that look rational for one institution, such as the Guards asserting military dominance, can look reckless to another. That divergence feeds uncertainty and raises the probability that an isolated military decision becomes a cascade. For the Gulf states, the attacks are a political and existential test. The UAE has emphasized its right to defend its sovereignty and has warned it reserves the right to respond. The strikes have also revealed new fault lines and partnerships. In some cases, air defense cooperation and intelligence exchanges between Gulf states and external partners have intensified behind the scenes. These operational linkages, exercises, temporary basing of defensive demands, and shared situational awareness are quietly reshaping regional alignments even as formal diplomacy lags. The oil market sees the shifts in real time. Insurers recalibrate, shipping companies plot alternative routes, and the price of risk rises for every tanker that must transit or avoid Hormuz. Some regional governments are already offering discounts for oil sold from routes that still rely on the Strait of Hormuz, a sign that commerce is learning to work around the choke point. Over time, if alternative routes gain traction, Iran's ability to wield the strait as absolute leverage could diminish. But that is a strategic, slow-moving effect. In the short term, the damage to trade flows and investor confidence is immediate. What would push Washington from pressure to strike? The calculus is simple in one respect and agonizing in another. A clear, repeated attack that risks civilian lives or successfully degrades a partner's capacity would be a political trigger. So would a cry. Edible intelligence assessment that Iran had crossed a nuclear threshold. But military action risks widening the war. Proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and elsewhere could be activated. Shipping could be further endangered. Regional capitals could be drawn into a conflict they prefer to avoid. That is why American strategy has emphasized a graduated approach. Protect shipping, degrade over military capability that threatens navigation, continue economic pressure, and keep a seat at the negotiating table, but only if verification is deep, immediate, and irreversible when it comes to enriched material. For Israel, the imperative is similar, but with an added dimension, the need to protect the homeland while coordinating with the US to maximize pressure on Tehran without losing coalition partners. There is one persistent truth in this standoff. Military means can be employed, but they are blunt instruments against what is essentially a political and technical challenge. Aerial strikes can destroy a factory or a facility. They cannot remove the knowledge a regime holds, nor the dispersed networks that secure material in hidden sites. Only a combination of intrusive verification, material removal or neutralization, and sustained political pressure can change the long-run trajectory. Among the more consequential risks is a breakdown in command and control inside Iran. When military organs act without government coordination, the chances of misinterpretation multiply. A regional state under fire may misjudge the origin or intent of an incoming weapon. A missile that lands short can be read as a missed strike intended for a different target. An intercepted drone could be framed as a wider attack. That fog is what leaders fear because it turns tactical choices into strategic leaps. At the international level, the war of words is intensifying Tehran's new leadership configuration. Now centered under a recently appointed supreme leader, has hardened certain elements fear inside the regime. The question facing negotiators and commanders abroad is whether those elements can be separated from the state's official negotiating position. If they cannot, then any deal that leaves the guards intact and enrichments in place risks being temporary, a pause that allows recovery and an eventual return to the same confrontational posture. The humanitarian dimension must not be forgotten. Civilians in the Gulf have suffered. Wounded workers in Fujairah, damage to ports and pipelines, and the psychological toll of living under intermittent missile alerts. The region's economies, which depend on stable movement of goods and energy, face real hardship. The international community has a stake in preventing further civilian harm, in securing maritime safety and in ensuring that any resolution includes enforceable verification. So where does this leave us? The immediate hours and days will be decisive. Washington has made clear it prefers a deal but will act if necessary. The conflict. Why Israel is prepared for both defense and limited offensive action. The Gulf states are mobilizing their defenses and seeking assurances. Iran's internal politics? Iran's internal politics remain volatile, and the Revolutionary Guard's posture will be the single most important variable in whether a small escalation becomes a regional conflagration. As a practical roadmap, expect short, sharp diplomatic moves, back-channel contacts, regional mediators, and urgent conversations about verification and the disposition of enriched material. Expect continued naval escorts and air patrols aimed at keeping trade moving. Expect a flurry of public and private warnings as both deterrence and signaling, and expect contingency plans, military, economic, and humanitarian, to be refined around the clock. In short, the crisis is not purely military. It is a mixture of strategic leverage, internal politics, and the terrifying fact that nuclear timelines remain compressed unless material is removed or effectively neutralizes. The choice facing leaders is stark. Find a path to durable verification and a political settlement that addresses the root causes of the crisis, or risk a wider spiral driven by miscalculation. Tonight, those who run ships at sea, those who fly the patrols overhead, and those who decide in command centers in Tehran, Abu Dhabi, Jerusalem, and Washington all carry heavy responsibility. The coming days will show whether restraint can be re-established through firm diplomacy and decisive verification, or whether the region will be drawn into a new and broader chapter of violence. For people on shorelines and on board tankers, the hope is the same, that leaders will choose the hard path of verified agreement over the easier slide into catastrophic escalation.